Morning Joe is that really painful 3-hour-long show from 6 to 9 in the morning over on MSNBC, and they're really excited because they just did something big.
Joe and I went to Mar-a-Lago to meet personally with President-elect Trump. It was the first time we have seen him in 7 years.
Gosh, that had to have been hard for her, huh? Had to have been really, really hard for Mika. You know, we have listened to these guys say day after day after day after day, and I don't even need to go back and play it for you. I've played it for you plenty of times before. We've heard how heinous, how awful Donald Trump is, how heinous and awful anybody is that would possibly ever vote for Donald Trump. And now all of a sudden, what, they're showing up on his doorstep at Mar-a-Lago? What is that about? What do you think it's about? I think it's about one thing and one thing only. It's about ratings, which have been tanking ever since Donald Trump went down 51% there at MSNBC. And I think it's about this, which is that the network itself is now in such bad shape that they're looking to spin it off along with a few other cable properties. Look, that business is done. We've been through that. That's why I'm glad you're over here. I'm glad you're subscribing, sharing, liking, and helping to contribute to this show in your way. We've got a live chat so I can see what you're saying. Look, that business is done. This has replaced it. And then some. And so this is the reality of where we are. And so they know that. So they're challenged and they're trying to save their hides. In addition, you get Donald Trump out there suing every Tom, Dick, and Harry as far as the networks go. And he's now got some power behind him because it looks as though he's moving forward with his plan to put Brendan Carr in as head of the FCC, which probably means some of these networks are going to have a hard time in that they're granted certain government rights to be over the airwaves. And if you're not honest, if you're not, in fact, down the middle, and you're just hammering one thing home all the time, and we know they are, just look at the Media Research Center, which has done the work to find that overwhelmingly the coverage has been negative for Donald Trump, whereas it was extremely positive for Kamala Harris. That's the reality of where we are now. And so, ladies and gentlemen, they're getting sued. They're about to get sold. The ratings are tanking. So what does Scarborough do? He says, okay, let me put on my thinking hat here. I mean, he's like turning into Tucker 2.0. I've played you the sound. I'm like, who is this guy? I mean, he's wearing a suit and tie now to work. And he's suddenly talking about how he's a Southern white male conservative. I'm like, whoa. Anyway, he went down there and he had a little discussion, the two of them did, with Donald Trump, and they were so proud of it. They had to come back on set today to talk to everybody about it. I wonder what some of his colleagues might have had to say. You know, the people like Joy Reid that absolutely, positively despise Donald Trump with everything they got. They probably don't like this. But I will tell you this, you know, Joe's a realist. He was a politician after all. I think he sees the handwriting on the wall and he figures this is what I got to do, and he's doing it.
Over the past week, Joe and I have heard from so many people, from political leaders to regular citizens, deeply dismayed by several of President-elect Trump's cabinet selections, and they are scared. Last Thursday, we expressed our own concerns on this broadcast and even said we would appreciate the opportunity to speak with the president-elect himself. On Friday, we were given the opportunity to do just that. Joe and I went to Mar-a-Lago to meet personally with President-elect Trump. It was the first time we have seen him in 7 years.
Now, we talked about a lot of issues, including abortion, mass
Is it me, or does she always look like she's smelling something really bad?
Deportation, threats of political retribution against political opponents, and media outlets. We talked about that a good bit. And it's going to come as no surprise to anybody who watches this show, has watched it over the past year or over the past decade, that we didn't see eye to eye on a lot of issues, and we told him so.
What we did agree on was to restart communications. My father often spoke with world leaders with whom he and the United States...
Restart communications as though you're like, I don't know, North Korea?
profoundly disagreed. That's a task shared by reporters and commentators alike. We had not spoken to President Trump since March of 2020, other than a personal call Joe made to Trump on the morning after the attempt on his life in Butler, Pennsylvania. In this meeting, President Trump was cheerful, he was upbeat, he seemed interested in finding common ground with Democrats on some of the most divisive issues. And for those asking why we would go speak to the president-elect during such fraught times, especially between us, I guess I would ask back, why wouldn't we? 5 years of political warfare has deeply divided Washington and the country. We have been as clear as we know how in expressing our deep concerns about President Trump's actions and words in the coarsening of public debate. But for nearly 80 million Americans, election denialism, public trials, and January 6th were not as important as the issues that moved them to send Donald Trump back to the White House with their vote. Joe and I realize
she's eating a little humble pie here, don't you think? I mean, she's like, we were wrong. You guys were right. You won. So now we have to move on.
It's time to do something different. And that starts with not only talking about Donald Trump, but also talking with him.
Right, because they need some ratings. Okay, you saw the numbers, right? Down 51% since the election. They're like, okay, give me more, give me more, give me more. If you can't beat them, join them. I mean, it's kind of gross in that literally the next morning, right after the whole thing went down, Joe was suddenly sounding really like he kind of liked Trump and he got it. And he was suddenly like this new man. And it's like, wait a second. I mean, I did this story for you guys the other day. I'm like, who is he really? Well, I don't think he knows himself. He's just collecting a paycheck and he's doing some of the boss's orders. Look, let's face it. Brian Roberts, who runs Comcast, he can't be too happy about this. He's got a new guy coming in at FCC, Brendan Carr, and Brendan Carr is not exactly going to make his life so easy given the likes of Joy Reid, etc. on the air. Joy might actually get her hind sent out the door. I'm not kidding, because did you see what Brandon sent out? Let me see if I can find this for you guys. Brandon Carr tweeted this. Check it out. He's done with the yeah, this is the guy who's going to come in. He's like the only conservative on the FCC panel right now. And he's like, I'm disgusted with this. This was the second most important thing to the FCC last year, right? So that meant, well, you have to have a certain number of people that look like this and have this kind of gender preferences and blah, 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 all over your airwaves, or somehow you're not in sync with what the FCC wants. And therefore, you're at risk for losing your license. So he's sick of it. He's like, yeah, no, I don't really care about that. So now Brian Roberts, head of Comcast, which owns NBC Universal, which owns MSNBC, doesn't have to worry about, do I have every Tom, Dick, Harry, Sue, Susie, Jane in a variety of different colors with purple hair, etc. on my air, then maybe actually I have a little bit more room. So it's a business. After all, it is a business. And I think no one knows that better than Joe Scarborough. Hence, what he was out there saying the very day after the election. I mean, Mika, his wife, could barely even look at him on set. She's glaring at him or just physically turned away the entire time when he was talking about, well, we lost this election because you see, even Democrats are concerned because their kids can't speak up in school because, you may just get canceled. That's exactly what happened. And then some. But where were you, Joe, like 2 weeks ago or even 2 months ago? No. These are people that are just out there for themselves. And when it was expedient for them to go after Donald Trump, they did. And now it looks like it's not so expedient to go after Donald Trump. And so they're changing their tune drastically. You know what? We'll take it. Fine. You know what? You guys want better ratings. You want to get them on the show. They also mentioned something about how, they just kind of need to find common ground in different areas, and it'll make them more interesting. Here they are with David Ignatius, who runs the Washington Post. He too was trying to suck up. I mean, the whole kit and caboodle here. Watch him.
David, also, I remember during the first term, at one point, you may not even remember this phone call. I was walking through the airport, and you politely said, every day, Joe, every day it's the same thing on your show. When you can find common ground, talk about it. And I've noticed you do that. I mean, I will tell you, when so many people were in shock, and Mika and I were surprised too after the election result, your first column was talking about how Donald Trump had the possibility to move us closer to peace in the Middle East. I think that was a very important column to write at the time. Again, I was a little surprised when I read it right after the election. But then you follow that up with some really tough columns about the real dangers with his DOD pick and also with Tulsi Gabbard. Is that the type of balancing you're talking about?
It is, Joe. I think we in the news business, in commentary, need to call him as we see him. During Donald Trump's first term, when he did something that I thought made sense, the Abraham Accords between Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain are a perfect example. I said without hesitation that I thought this was good for the country, good for the region. I felt the same way about negotiating with North Korea to try to reduce the risk of nuclear war. When he did things I thought hurt the country, I tried to be as emphatic, again, as I could be. But we're in the business of covering the world, trying to see it whole. And if people think that we are partisans on one side or another, I think in the end, their confidence in our ability to tell the truth, to do our job, declines. You see that some of that in some of the poll numbers about how people feel about
things. Like, no one actually trusts any of you guys at all right? Like, that's not like all of a sudden nobody's trusted you for the last however many years. The mainstream media bias has been so massive. And then, like, what was scary to me anyway, it's partly why I started 76 Research, was it was permeating over into Wall Street. So now it's like, okay, we don't care if you make any money anymore. We just care that you get, people with purple hair and identify as a cat on your board. Somehow that's more important than actually profits. Profits matter, profitability matters, growth matters. It's one of the reasons why I'm so excited for this market right now. Rob and I, my co-founder at 76 Research, just came out with investinmaga.com. It's a free guide on how to invest in this growing economy, this booming economy. There's going to be a lot of opportunity, believe me. And I want to make sure that everybody, at least if you're watching this show, that you're somehow in on it. 76research.com, that is the financial research website I created. This guide is free. Invest in MAGA. You can also go over to 76 Research and get our model portfolios. You can get the Founders Club, which gives you all the model portfolios. We have 10 to 15 stocks in each one of those, but there's going to be a lot of opportunity. You know what? Like, I call it like it is. And I tend to see through some of this insanity, which was exactly what the mainstream media had for the last 4 years. Total, utter insanity. Meanwhile, we've got a few things going on internationally that are obviously of concern. You've seen, of course, that the president has authorized the use of long-range weapons into Russia for the first time, and Sweden's obviously really concerned. They're actually sending out pamphlets on how to prepare for this potential problem. It's awful. It's scary. When these sorts of things happen, it's one of the reasons why I say, look, I'm glad I have a little bit of gold in my portfolio. And I think you need, to always be sort of preparing for the off chance of something not so good happening. And so that's when you need it, right? That's when you want it. And if you're worried about things right now, I do encourage you, even if you're not worried about things, like I consider gold part of a well-diversified portfolio. I encourage you to call my friends over at American Hartford Gold. You can text them and get up to $15,000 with qualifying offers by texting them my name in free silver. So text Trish to 65532, it's Trish to 65532, or go to trishlovesgold.com. You can also call them at 1-844-495-1115.